Welcome to Elevate at Home. I'm Mike Barker.
And I'm Samantha Barker.
And we're your team behind Elevate, where we build dream outdoor spaces like custom hardscapes, pools, and more.
On this podcast, we'll take you behind the scenes of our industry, sharing insights, answering your questions, and giving you an inside look at our projects.
Plus, we'll be joined with industry experts, other business owners, and even our customers to share their experiences.
Whether you're planning a project, in the industry, or just love great outdoor spaces, you're in the right place.
Let's dive in. This is Elevate at Home. All right, welcome back to Elevate at Home. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a pretty important step, and that is proper site planning. I'm Mike. I'm here with my beautiful wife, Samantha, and together we own Elevate Outdoor Living and Elevate Pool and Spa, specializing in in-ground pool installation and hardscape installations here in the mid-Michigan area.
Today we're going to be walking through key factors like property layout, drainage, and some common mistakes to avoid.
Yeah. So if you guys are enjoying this content that we've created so far, please be sure to subscribe to us. We're trying to do these episodes here once a week. Like it, comment it, send us some questions. We appreciate it. But let's dive in.
All right. So the first thing that we need to talk about today. So we're going to talk about the proper layout for the site and why that makes such a difference.
Yeah. So, when in a project layout, there's a few things that we want to consider. One is just the size of the yard, the space that we have to work with, and what we can actually do with it. And so, that's really going to determine, in a pool sense, how big of a pool we can do, what shape, what way we can put it, what direction I should say we can put it, and so on and so forth. And so what would you say are some of the things that can affect how you lay out the site? So some of the things that we consider are some setbacks, setbacks on the house, the property line, how far away we are to certain elements. We have to think about where utilities are. We have to think about where septic and well are. Those are kind of the big ones that we need to look out for. And then really the next one for a pool is access from the house and how it lays out to, how can we quickly and efficiently get it to the house? Are we coming from a deck, coming down some steps? Are we coming out of a back slider? How are we getting to that pool? So that way, that's kind of how we'll figure out how we're gonna orient it in the yard. And really, when you're coming to your pool, you don't want to come right to your deep end. And I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you just want to cannonball in, right? Mm-hmm. But you want to come into your steps, your shallow end, your ledge, whatever. Maybe it's a side entry pool. So we want to just think about that when we're talking about the layout of the pool and of the project itself. And really, we start with the pool and we design around from there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say these things that we're talking about, they really come into consideration when we do our initial site visit. Mm-hmm. So that is really something that we're looking at when we're taking, grade and we're taking photos and measurements of everything. You're looking at those setbacks and considering what slope there is for drainage and grading and all of that kind of stuff before you're even doing your designs.
Yeah. Another big one that homeowners don't typically think about or don't always think about, and they're kind of surprised that we do, but is where the sun is.
That is surprising to me, actually. So that is like when you first started talking about that is something I never considered. I didn't ever think about, but you're very good at knowing where to place things because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've seen some other people's pools where, they're blocked out by the house. Either they weren't able to, push the pool back far enough, or they just didn't think about it. I don't know. But, when we're laying out the pool, we want to make sure that we keep that pool in the sun as much as possible.
And that makes so much sense when you say it. It really does. And it's like, do other people just not think about that?
I think they just slap them in the ground sometimes and
I do
and
too.
just go for it. But
Yes. So that is something that is so important when you're considering the layout of your pool, is really considering the location of the sun throughout the day.
yeah, throughout the day, and specifically the where if you have a ledge in your pool, the entry point, the shallow point, you typically want that facing the sun. And when we say facing the sun, typically we want to have really good southwest sun exposure, and that's going to give you the fullest day of sun during the summer as possible. And so when you're lounging next to the pool, when you're lounging in the ledge at the pool, you wanna be facing the sun. You don't really want your back to it. Um, and so that's a big portion of how we design around. Once we go through all of the aspects of setbacks and utilities and whatnot, we are really designing around the 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 layout of the sun and which way you're going to be facing.
Yeah. I know we kind of just briefly touched on it, but drainage is another thing that is a huge consideration when you're doing a layout. So, can you kind of explain what that looks like and how we design or lay out spaces and include the drainage in there?
Yeah, so draining is extremely important in the whole project, not just in, the pool, not just in the hardscape, not just in the landscape, but in the whole project. Drainage is really one of the most important things in your project to have your project last long term. And so if you don't think about drainage, and when we say drainage, it can be downspouts, it can be a sump pump, it can be a county drain, it can be a neighborhood drain. Um, it can just be the natural slope and runoff in your yard. And so you have to think about all those things, or we have to think about all those things, so that we take the water away from the space. And we don't want to just, take the water and push it on your neighbor's space, but we want to mitigate it properly. And so that can be, that can mean burying downspouts out to a main run, and we take that out to the street, or we take it to a back location that has natural runoff. It can be, a deck drain. So, like the pool deck, is all sloped. And so we have a drain running in the deck. So that way that can take that surface water, catch it in that drain, tie it out into the yard, into the system, and carry that away. And then to catch yard water, we do a lot of French drains. And that's basically going to catch the water in a saturated area at the base of a hill. Really, it's catching that groundwater and carrying that away from the space. And so, without getting too much into it, those are really the main things that we want to keep in mind with drainage.
And I think too, there's we've had some people think that they can't do a pool because they have a naturally wet yard. Mm-hmm. But there's so much that we can do with the drainage and with grading and things like that to mitigate that water so that you can safely have a pool in your yard.
Yeah. So, for instance, if you have a high water table, that's something it's somewhat common in our area that we have, sort of high water table. Everyone at some point, you're going to hit groundwater, just because the ground is just so saturated. But, if you live next to, we did one on a lake, and that was the highest groundwater that we had really dealt with. If you live close to a pond, if you live in agricultural land, actually, we had another house that has lots of slope, and they're in agriculture land, and all of that is just, field runoff. And so there is ways to mitigate that. And, we do some well pointing, on the side of the pool that just allows us to be able to pump out the groundwater and have that pool shell be in the ground without, too much hydrostatic pressure. So we've got a good friend of ours that has to do that a lot because they do pools down in North Carolina. I mean, basically right on the ocean.
Yeah.
So there's ways to do it.
Yeah.
But it's a very important part of the process.
Yeah, of the planning and figuring out the layouts and things like that.
Yep. And then the grading. You know, grading is also going to manipulate the groundwater and the drainage. And, there's instances where you might need to put in a retaining wall to, basically catch that water. And essentially that water is going to come down to the back of the wall, and it's going to go down the back side of that wall. And then there's a drain at the bottom of the wall that carries that water out. It'll daylight through the wall, and it'll carry it out and around. And so that's another way that, we're dealing with the drainage in certain situations.
And I think that's one of those things that you really have to talk with your contractor about is how do they plan to mitigate that water away from your pool? Because we've seen it where they'll just put your pool in the ground and they don't, that's your problem now. You know what I mean? If they're just a pool contractor, and that's not really something that they really think about necessarily, it's going to come back to you as the homeowner. So it's really important to do your due diligence and make sure that they really understand drainage and grading and all of these things that are going to be important to the longevity of your pool.
Yeah, there would be nothing more frustrating than, saying, "Hey, we're gonna do this pool," and you spend $100,000 at a pool, and then they leave it to you, and then a landscaper or hardscaper comes along and says, "Oh, by the way, you need this $50,000 wall,
right,
to hold up your pool because you can't have all this slope; it's just gonna erode away." So,
and we've seen it,
and
it's
yep,
it's the worst.
Yep, there's a lot of times where, you have to do walls, and I'd say in part of the planning of your project, retaining walls and water drainage are two very expensive things to deal with,
and very important.
Very important, though.
Yeah,
those are the things that don't really have any beauty to them, but they're necessary. They're necessary evils. So
yeah. So I know we just talked about the importance of the retaining walls and things like that, and I think that and not planning ahead of time can really be some of the most expensive mistakes that people make when they're doing pools.
Yeah, there's a lot of projects that we get into that, we do these designs, and they're these big, grandiose designs, and, they come with a pretty heavy price tag. And so what we say is, hey, let's talk about phasing this out. And so, the first phase is going to be, the pool deck, and, so on and so forth, and say, we want to do a pavilion in the future. That's part of the future plan, or we want to do an outdoor kitchen or something. What we do, and what, so we don't have to move backwards, is you want to plan on having those footings in. You want to plan on having gas lines run for the future. You want to plan on having electrical lines run for the future, stubbing out any water lines that you might want to do. So thinking ahead, on those future phases will save you money in the long run, versus going, oh, shoot, now we need to run a gas line. We have to tear up this part of the pool deck and go right through.
Yeah, I think that goes along with having the design done,
and having a proper
and having
done.
someone come out and actually tell you all of the things that are possible that you maybe didn't even think about. And so whether you decide to do them or not, even thinking that you might want to do something in the future and planning for it while your yard is completely already torn up is going to save you so much in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to just asking questions to your contractor, to whomever you want to hire, making sure that they are, educating you throughout the process. That's a big thing is, obviously as a homeowner, you're probably going to be educating yourself, but we're here as a resource, not just to build the project, but to teach you about it, along the way. And you want someone who is really going to answer any of your questions and bring up some things that they might see, and can almost be a red flag if they're not willing to answer your questions.
Yeah, and I think that we'll talk about that in a future episode, is kind of some of those big questions to ask your contractors, and some of the things to really look out for when you're planning a large project like this.
Yeah, so it's a big process.
It is, and I think this is a short but sweet topic because it is important to know what to think about when you're laying out a project like this, and kind of some of those questions to ask, and just kind of the importance of your site layout.
Yep. Well touched. Well hit. So
Yep.
I think that's it. We're going to wrap it up. That music means this episode is getting done. So thank you guys for tuning in with us on this one. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the content that we're coming up with. Our next episode, we are going to be talking about transforming the backyard with hardscapes. That's a fun one. So be sure that you tune in next week for that one. So we appreciate it, guys. Thank you for tuning in to Elevate at Home. And until next time, dream big and build smart. We'll see ya.